Good evening and welcome to TownHall Central for Thursday, March 12th. And we're coming from Riverside, California. And we've got a hot topic for tonight, fraud in California. It's everywhere. It's under a rock. It's out in the open. It's everywhere. So I've got two wonderful experts that are going to be talking about it. So hang on to your seats because it's just going to knock your hats off. So let's get started. I want to make sure you put on your calendar. Our next show is not on our normal Thursday. It's going to be on Thursday, April 30th. And we have Susan Shelley. She's going to be going over our June ballot. So make sure you put on your calendar. It's not our normal second Thursday. It is going to be April 30th. So let's get started. TownHall Central is brought to you with the support of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association and Greg Britton, attorney at law. So we're learning about fraud not only in our federal government tonight, but also in our state. And that is tonight's focus, fraud in California. I'm very excited to hear from our host and speaker tonight to learn about what they have uncovered and what we can do as citizens if and when we discover fraud. So I'm going to introduce tonight's host. Ginny Ray LaRue is a business owner, author, strategic advisor with a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from the University of Virginia and an MBA from Columbia Business School. She has built technology companies in the energy and financial services sectors, and owns Management Consulted, where she has worked with organizations to evaluate performance, reduce inefficiencies, and improve operations. Her experience analyzing complex systems, identifying waste, and driving organizational reform makes her well suited for this role. So Jenny, welcome. I'm so excited to have you on. And Jennifer Horn told me, you need to have Jenny on the show. So she got us connected, and I'm so thankful for that. So tell me, how did you get involved in finding fraud?
I love this. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. Really glad to be here. I'll just give a quick background because what we really want to talk about tonight is what's actually happening in investigations. And, we want to really encourage you that there is change afoot in California. I think a lot of us have known for a while that things were wrong. But that's really where it started for me. My journey into politics was a fundamental question of who is in charge of this place and why are they running it the way that they're running it? And in particular, that really focused during COVID and after on Gavin Newsom, who is the CEO of the state. He's in charge. And so, I come from a background where I do analytics, I do organizational reviews. And so my first foray into this was actually at the beginning of last year. Having read the budget for a number of years, I knew that California was already spending more than some of our peer states, but I started to try to figure out exactly where some of that money was going. And a lot of what we found with manual review, without a lot of the fraud tips that y'all have, and without some of the AI tools that we're now able to also apply, was just a ton of wasted money. I mean, it was everywhere, right? Billions of dollars of programs that had started and then stopped, right? Universities that had been funded with 13 graduates, solar panel fields that had been funded, billions of dollars that never got built. So initially it was just wow, these people are just really bad at running a government. That was kind of my first thought. What we found this year in this kind of second iteration of CalDOJ, which is now becoming quite a large volunteer organization statewide, an investigation body, and we're also coordinated now with the federal government, with Trump in office, and his interest in California, as well as our local attorney generals in certain places. There are certain, Seneca, I'm sure, is going to talk about some that are definitely not interested in finding or prosecuting fraud. They're probably in on it, in fact. But what we've really found is actually more malicious than what we thought initially, which is that the money that we think should be going toward legitimate uses in California is not just being wasted or funneled into projects that are unfinished. They're actually going into returns where we're seeing voter registration get funded for the Democrats. We're seeing candidate recruitment. We're seeing local advocacy. We're seeing anti-ICE doxing. We're seeing multiple different activities that are actually funding the party in power to stay in power, which is so much bigger than what we kind of found initially. And so I'll share a few of the specific examples that we've already released and also our ongoing fraud investigation process today. So that's a good introduction, I think, for now. Is that good, Denise? Are you happy with that?
And you might want to mention that you're in charge of Doge for California.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the director of Doge. So if we find something that's good, that was probably not me. It was some great member of my team. If something happens that's bad, it's probably my fault. But overall, in general, we're finding really, really great stuff that's happening in the state. My job is just to really, I'm a very anti-territorial person. I think that California belongs to the nation, and our focus here should be on righting what has been wrong for actually what we're finding out is not just a few years, but a generation. And so we're going to do that. We're going to fix it. We're going to make California transparent, and we're going to do it from the outside, and we're going to do it from the inside. So I'll talk a little bit about those specific tactics as well. From here, though, I want to make sure that we give Seneca the opportunity to introduce, please walk through some of the work that you're doing, and then let's get into it, because I think everybody came here to figure out what's going on in California.
Seneca, can you unmute yourself?
Oh, I am unmuted.
Okay, there you are. So Jenny, do you want to introduce him? Or do you want me to go ahead and do that?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I will introduce. Okay, so Seneca Scott is an Oakland and Nashville-based political consultant, writer, and organizer working at the intersection of media, organizing, civic reform. A national CBS contributor, Scott's writing and commentary have been published in Newsweek, Compact Magazine, City Journal, and the Free Press, where he focuses on government accountability, political realignment, and the future of American cities. And an organizing director for multiple labor unions, Scott has built worker-led coalitions and negotiated complex agreements across California. He's a former East Bay director of the SCIU, Local 1021, where he represented thousands of public sector workers and led major contract campaigns and labor actions. He is also known for his leadership role in the successful recall of Oakland's former mayor in 2024. Scott holds a Bachelor of Science from Cornell University's School of Industrial and Labor Relations. Through consulting, media production, and organizing, he works to advance transparency, fiscal responsibility, and institution reform at the local level. He is the producer of a video channel called Gotham Oakland. So, Scott, what made you decide to look into fraud in Oakland?
Like many
I'm
people.
I'm sorry, Seneca. My apologies.
No, that was right. Fraud in Oakland.
Okay.
So like many people, it was self-defense. Prior to 2020, I would have considered myself a regular liberal. I probably even called myself a democratic socialist. Not that I was a member of DSA, but I was a normal union lefty guy because in theory, it sounded great. It never really been pressure checked. And I was very just out of local politics. I couldn't even tell you who my council person was all the way up until 2020. And I often say, if you can't look out in your backyard and tell me the names of your trees, the school board member and your council member, then you should stop commenting on global and national politics and maybe get in touch with your local community. But I was guilty, I charged. And in 2020, I ran for city council because the elders in my community dragged me down and made me because they know I was very vocal. And I had some union backgrounds, and I had no idea how government works. My knowledge of municipal finance was pretty much streamlined to labor relations and negotiations. So basically, does the city have enough money to afford raises and pensions for our members? And if not, then where will it come from? But it was never looking for fraud. And the first time I saw something just shocked me was when I ran for mayor. Now, I saw the homeless industrial complex. I read Schellenberger's book, San Francisco, and you started to get a baseline education at maybe these nonprofits. Just like Jenny said, at first I thought it was just incompetence. I think it's Pavlov's razor. If it's between incompetence and corruption, it's usually incompetence. Well, that theory was wrong in California. And what I was soon to discover is that this isn't just local corruption. This is corruption engineered nationwide. This is a global effort to destabilize American cities. And people are, as a consolation prize, they're able to enrich themselves personally, but that's not the main goal. The main goal of this corruption is not to enrich the people who are involved, in my opinion. The main goal of the corruption you see in California is just what you see playing out in progressive Democrat-run cities across America, which is just utter destruction, collapse of any public trust, and a remarkable lack of value. And you only do that if you're trying to sort of take over a country from the inside. So I don't give them the incompetence. They are actually enemies of the state. And do we have an echo here? Is that me? I'm quite sure what that says in the
I think you're good. I think you're on a roll.
All
Yeah,
right.
you're fine.
Let me wrap. So I knew that there was something amiss, but what got me is when I decided to run for mayor, and I showed up at right before 5 o'clock. There's a deadline to file, and the person who ended up winning was late to even enter the building, didn't have her paperwork ready, and filed hours after the deadline. So I got the Alameda County Taxpayers Association and a brilliant lawyer named Marlene Sachs to file a lawsuit. Now, as you know, lawsuits take a while. By the time we proved that the city deleted footage, they timestamped everyone's paperwork at the exact same time, including mine. And then the excuse was that the timestamp was malfunctioning. But a public record request shows that there were 4 timestamps in the building, including 2 in that office. And when you asked them, why didn't you just use the other timestamp you had? Or why did you order another one? Their answer was, well, I don't know. But they had to admit that they faked it on purpose. And I knew it happened. And this lady ended up not only winning, but she was recalled by the time we won the lawsuit. So we just settled it. And the city admitted no guilt as part of the settlement. But the guilt was admitted in the deposition itself, where people under oath said that they deleted timestamps and et cetera. So they cheated. Not only did they cheat there, in the election itself, she won by 673 votes, when 3,093 votes were disqualified due to ranked choice voting. We tried to get a manual recount. The Alameda County ordered a manual recount. We never got it because the registrar just refused to do it. And ranked choice voting, I call it rigged choice voting. It allows you to basically engineer elections because it uses the closed source algorithm, which is a fancy way of saying we count your votes in secret and we can't authenticate it. I could go on and on and on, but I started Gotham Oakland in 2024 when we were recalling the mayor. And we knew that she was taking pay for play, all of the things she's being charged by the FBI. We were saying these things in the public domain over and over and over again. And so we saw at least someone picked up one case, because a persistent complaint that I have, and I'm sure that a lot of you listening have the same issue, no one ever gets caught. We keep showing massive fraud, election engineering, election rigging, paying people to sign ballots with fake names, as we found out this week in San Francisco just a few days ago, and nothing ever happened. And so it looks like we have to get the federal government involved, because our top cop in the state of California, which is Rob Bonta, is a criminal. I have no problem saying that. I would love for him to sue me for libel so we could go to court for anti-SLAPP, and I could go to Discovery and ask him some questions about his money and what he's spending money on. But I've talked much too much. Again, Jenny and myself and probably anyone else who's been spending even a little bit of time looking under these rocks can write books and go on and on and on like robots for days and days and days, because it is just that much fraud in the state of California. We have so much fraud in the state of California that we could be taking care of our elders. We could be taking care of our children. We could be handling early childhood nutrition, which is the fundamental building block for knowledge retention that often gets overlooked. There's so many problems we could be solving. We could be giving support for local businesses. I don't say small, but local businesses that want to grow. We can't do any of that because of our entrenched corruption. And until California punishes people and we actually get some justice for taxpayers, we're not going to move forward as a state.
Seneca, I'll even take it one step further. And then if you're game, I think we should just go back and forth and talk about some of the investigations that we're doing. But I would say we could keep our people. Fundamentally, if we don't, the way that this cycle of corruption works right now is that it is an insatiable pit of money. there is never enough money because it's getting frittered away, and then there's always some new pet cause. It's a Newsom proposition, or it's some other thing that somebody's asking for. And we're literally digging ourselves into a hole, not just today, but for our future. And as people who used to come here to build the future are looking for where that's going to be, they're not looking at California right now. And so we're losing population. We're losing our businesses, our wealth generators, our idea engineers. We're really like losing the value of what makes California California. And so we have to not just get this money even reappropriated. Some of it we need to get refunded so that people who want to come here can build in the best building environment that there is in the world. So I can talk a little bit about one of those specific examples if y'all are game. One of our first investigations for CalDoge. And I'll actually start the story just a little bit earlier, because last year I did a video post. Seneca, kind of like you, right? The awakening happens gradually, potentially. But I was at a very well-funded, expensive to get in children's museum in Orange County called Discovery Cube. And on the wall of one of the exhibits about dinosaurs for Discovery Cube was funded by Proposition, and I don't remember which one it was, but I looked it up, and it was a Save the Water Act proposition. So my first question was, wait a second, I'm pretty sure that when we voted for this proposition, what we thought we were getting was dams and water infrastructure and the delivery of clean water into our houses and businesses and farms, right? This is what I thought. But clearly I'm standing here in the middle of a program that probably had 50 ways to fund this. They somehow got a grant from the state of California that was supposed to go to water, and instead it's built something right here in this museum. Fundamentally, is that a problem? It definitely feels like it's inappropriate, but it kind of started this questioning of like, how many things have we said are going to go to one thing and they've actually gone to something else? And this is actually not only fraud in the way that the DOJ would investigate it. This is actually institutionalized fraud. This is when we tell people we're going to do one thing and we do something totally different.
I'm sorry, let me unmute myself. I have to raise you one, Jenny. I have to raise you one. So, and you know that we love passing new taxes in progressive cities and woke cities. We had a measure in Oakland in 2024 that we passed that they said had a minimum police staffing, which is one of the reasons we passed it. Keep in mind, Oakland only had 480 sworn officers today for a city of 500,000. We're supposed to have 850 minimum. So this tax measure, parcel tax, says that if we don't have 700 minimum officers, then they can't charge. If they don't budget for 700 minimum officers, they can't charge the parcel tax. But they didn't budget for it. But there's a little escape clause that says that if there's a fiscal emergency, they don't have to use the money for the intended purpose. However, the city of Oakland 2 weeks ago declared a fiscal surplus, a financial surplus. So they declared a surplus because of one of the negotiations with SEIU, my former union. If they didn't get their raise, the big raise, unless the city ended the year with a surplus. So the city manufactured a surplus by using the money that they raided from measures that they told voters were going to be used for minimum police staffing, and it gets worse. If you did not use the measure money, you wouldn't have a surplus. So you're manufacturing a surplus to pay the public sector labor unions even more raises. However, you're not following Measure NN. So they're claiming simultaneously we all have a fiscal crisis, but we also have a surplus, something we haven't seen in over a decade. We're going to sue them. We're going to file a lawsuit to compel the city of Oakland to return Measure NN money to taxpayers because they failed to budget for 700 officers. And the excuse that they gave for fiscal crisis is BS if you're also claiming to have a surplus. And I can't wait for them to hear explain this in court. This is one of like 50 examples I could give, but it's sort of like the same thing. You're promising people. Also, one thing they do is they call these citizen citizen ballot measures, but citizens have nothing to do with it. Public sector unions pay for all of these signature gathering. There's another tax on the ballot right now that the union just paid $400,000 at CIU to get on the ballot for June that calls for another parcel tax that the city of Oakland budgeted over a year ago in our budget. So imagine a city budgeting that you're going to pass a tax in a year. That's how much confidence they have that Oakland voters will approve. I used air quotes a lot because do we approve it? I don't know. We don't have election integrity. But it just gets so bonkers when you start to really like look at what these cities are doing. But what's not, I mean, we have to laugh, not to cry, but what's not funny are people who lose property because they can't pay the taxes. People who, right, like people who have to give up their money. Who buys it? Institutions or nonprofits. I've got one more, and this came up in LA today in the larger scale, but it's happening in Oakland. We fund a nonprofit called La Raza. La Raza does eviction defense. Oakland, 90% of evictions in Oakland are due to non-payment of rent. 90%. 100% of La Raza's clients last year were due to non-payment of rent. They get millions of dollars to the city of Oakland so they can extort taxpayers in Oakland who own properties, who they depend on to anchor all of our taxes. And we're actually paying for the privilege of having someone use our own taxpayer dollars in court against us. So the lawyer
to live for free, right?
They get it for free, and we have to pay for it. It's insane. I'm sorry, it's insane. It's crazy.
Well, you're not alone in that. The city of Los Angeles just approved $180 million for exactly the same thing. So who wants to be a landlord in Los Angeles when you're going to have the city itself not protect you as a landlord, not follow their own laws, but actually fund the very organizations that are going to perpetuate crimes against these landlords, right? And so anyhow, it's a big adventure. It's a big mess. Like you said, you have to laugh so you don't cry about it all the time. But one of the things that we're finding, I want to go back to my investigation because I think this is a really great, clear example of exactly what you're talking about. That was done at the statewide level. So we passed a cannabis tax when we passed the legalization of marijuana in California. And this was passed, just over 10 years ago. As a part of that, we said that a portion of the tax had to go to fund something that in general people believed in. It was actually probably part of the reason that we got marijuana passed, which was substance abuse prevention for youth. Right? So $370 million over that almost decade, it basically kicked in when Newsom took office. So it's been almost a decade now, went to not directly to organizations, not with any oversight. It went to a financial intermediary. I actually visited their office building in Sacramento. Guess what they have? Riverfront office property. Why? Because their funding went from a few $100,000 to $370 million. Their executive compensation, which we found is one of the kind of key fraud flags in a lot of these organizations, is over $600,000. And their job is to take money from the state of California, skim. Get this, they take 8 to 9% for private donations. They take 20% for public donations. And so they're skimming 20% of that money, $75 million off for themselves. And then they're passing the rest of it off in micro grants that are under $1 million to over 500 different organizations. And we could not find one that has anything to do with substance abuse prevention. Now, I'll tell you what they were doing. And again, this is not a judgment on whether these organizations can or should exist, but both receiving public money, receiving large amounts of public money, receiving public money with no insight or oversight, and finally having no reporting statutes and no accountability to the original law that was passed, seems like we're a pretty dang far cry from substance abuse prevention. And so we're funding Asian LGBTQ storytelling in the Central Valley. We're funding Sikh youth empowerment, high schoolers getting enrolled to vote for Democrats. We're funding voter registration all over the state. None of this has anything to do with substance abuse prevention. And what the Democrats have done in Sacramento is that they have kind of, like you mentioned, first of all, there hasn't been any penalty for this because nobody's noticed. It was done in a way that was hidden because we were able to find this with AI, but it was so large and so fractured that it wasn't clear to the naked eye exactly what was happening. But also they've said, just in public standing, well, voter registration is substance abuse prevention. And I don't know any reasonable person who thinks that that is actually true. But when they feel like they are outside of the law, able to do whatever they want, then, like you mentioned, there has been no penalty, no accountability. So one of my favorite things that happened in CalDOJ so far in our first 6 weeks operating in this kind of phase of it is that Gavin Newsom's press office tweeted our message and said, it's total lies. The only thing this isn't allowed to be used for is partisan activities. And we were like, okay, game on.
They are using it for base building.
It's 100% partisan activities. And they could have said, like, Steve Hilton and Jenny Ray hate people that are for substance abuse prevention. They hate kids. They could have said other mean and also untrue things, but they happen to speak the truth without recognizing it. And so we filed an immediate case with the DOJ that afternoon because we said they are acknowledging that the purpose of this law is antithetical to exactly what they're doing. So that was kind of one of our first examples. And Seneca, I've got more, but I'll turn it back over to you so you can share some of your investigations.
No, that's a great one. It's hard to top that. I focus more locally with the exception of watching Rob Bonta giving $500,000 to who knows what from his campaign and getting caught for that, which was, again,
not just for Super Bowl tickets this time, right?
No, where's the follow-up?
Well, so tell the audience what money it's going to, because you told us before the show started, but the audience doesn't.
What's that? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, well, talk about where the money's going to, the $500,000.
Well, you can look it up right now. What he claims, he has two different stories. The first story is that he wanted to help supplement the investigation against Sheng Tao and the Duongs, who are his donors and friends. Then the second story was that he used it just to make sure that he was okay legally, which could be true. But here's one thing we do know. We do know that Sheng Tao could bring down Rob Bonta, and they're not giving her a deal or offering her a deal, the FBI. So they want her scout, and I think they want the Bontas, although they're not being charged. So let me just be very clear about that. And also, her lawyer is named Jeffrey Tsai, Tsai. He is the lawyer for Kamala Harris, former vice president's husband. He is one of the most powerful lawyers and one of the most expensive law firms in the state, if not the country. And this is a very lengthy, expensive trial. $500,000 sounds about right for the legal bill that she's ran up so far for the last year or so. And my hypothesis is that he got that money on over to her. Who's paying for her lawyer? Sheng Tao's broke. Everyone knows she's broke. She has no money. She's in debt. So anyway, that's my story. I have no way of proving it, but the point is, why is there no formal investigation from the California, what is the regulatory agent, the Fair Practice? Is it Fair Practice?
Yeah, the FPPC.
Yeah, what are they doing?
Well, I could tell you, when I ran for governor 2 years ago, I got audited like every statewide candidate. They tell you you're going to get audited. I was like, bring it on. I have nothing to hide. My audit happened over 2 years after I ran for governor. So if I had won instead of Gavin Newsom, my audit would have been completed 2 years into my 4-year term. And so, Seneca, what you're basically seeing in a lot of these state agencies, and I'll give you a couple of other examples, is that instead of just gross incompetence, it's just pure negligence, right? Like they're literally not doing the job that they're assigned to do. These audits taking 2 years from the point of this moment is incredibly problematic, because if something comes up, then the election, we're closer to the new election than we were to the old election when something happened. And so you have an enforcement body, a legislature that has said that they have only even looked at 25% of the fraud cases that have been brought, a state auditor that is not auditing. You have a controller's office that functionally is not actually managing any budgetary oversight. And so this is what is enabling all of these things. And investigators like you, people that are on our team and more, are going to have to bring the pain from the outside first to bring accountability to these things. Because when Newsom's press office has to respond to a claim that they're funneling money to these organizations, that's the first shedding of light that has happened, because the state agencies are not fundamentally doing their job in the first place.
Well,
and so
I'll take it past that. I'll give you a fun story. Now, we shared some organizational blame, being a new nonprofit with not a lot of money and funding. But Rob Bonta did a correspondence audit on my nonprofit right when we started attacking his political allies in Oakland. And the basis was a lawn sign that we had that says, "We believe in the power of neighbors to create a safe and livable city." I don't know how that could be perceived as being political, but that was their...
Sounds like hate speech to me, Seneca.
How dare you run a lawn sign? Lawn signs are inherently political. That was their whole thing. So doing any lawn signs whatsoever as a C3 is something that warrants an investigation, regardless of the message, which is poppycock. However, there are... Rob Bonta's Person of the Year award in 2020 went to a local person named Carol Fife, who's another deeply corrupt individual. Her nonprofits got $4 million, like many nonprofits did in 2020. A lot of nonprofits got heavily money right in 2020, a big influx of billions of dollars around the country. Not only are they registered in Monroe, Louisiana, they have not registered with the California properly. In 6 years, no investigations into various nonprofits that are operating illegally that have received millions of dollars and haven't even filed 990 for the years they got that money. So, and this is just, I mean, we have other lawfare. During the actual recall election, the City of Oakland's Public Ethics Commission filed charges against us, claiming that we were raising money illegally. That charge was thrown out of court as being unconstitutional, but yet the City of Oakland still has it open, just so the local papers can say it's open and continue to double-ended smear, which is, now we're moving from, and I don't want to beleaguer this too much, but when you move from just corruption to having control of the media's message, now you're talking about emerging totalitarianism that is very foreign to most Americans who tend to trust our local media. And they're able to manufacture consent and allow for people to continue to fail forward into positions of increased prominence, even though they're smoking guns, that they're not just incompetent, but corrupt. So we've got our work cut out for us. I want to hear more about Cal Doge and what are the enforcement plans for getting some of your, some scalps, if you will. I don't want to be rude, but yeah, we need some scalps. We need some people arrested.
So let me just address that, actually, because that's one of the common questions that we have. Because I think in general, when this kind of injustice comes to the surface, there is a sense that there should be something done to make it right. And I'll tell you kind of what the pathways are to do that. And Seneca's already talked about one of them, which is lawfare, right? We have to actually sue for accountability, for exposure, and also to require discovery in many cases for some of these issues to be made public, because otherwise somebody sits in an office with all of their cronies around them, they're all on the payroll, and everybody that they've been funding is fundamentally on their payroll too. And so if you don't actually go through the courts, we can have a separate discussion about whether the courts are even, appropriately just, but they're not. But ultimately, like, that's kind of one of the ways that we can do it. But I want to talk about a couple of the other ways that we're also pursuing. I mentioned earlier the DOJ, and I actually had a really good conversation with Bill Asaley, who is one of our DOJ prosecutors. He's the U.S. attorney. He has a big job. His job isn't just fraud and waste in California, although I think he's wishing some days that it was. He also has to manage Homeland Security. He's managing a much larger purview, and he only has 200 lawyers in a staff room that should have about 350 to actually file these motions and pursue these. So one of the ways that we're working, Seneca, with organizations like the DOJ is that I just asked him, I said, what is worth it for you to pursue and what do you need? Because we actually have now, through our tip line at CalDoge, we have over 800 cataloged unique fraud claims, some directly from whistleblowers, others that are kind of like, there is this building where a guy has been doing shady stuff for a long time and we want to look into it, or we want somebody else to look into it. And these are statewide. Like, we are mapping them across the state. This is not just in one little hotbed. These are all over the state of California. Well, so we kind of said to him, like, we have 800 of them. We're a volunteer organization. How do we help pick some of the ones that are super important? And so he gave us that criteria. And he also shared with us, and this might be helpful for you in some of your fraud investigations, that the Office of the Inspector General, part of the HHS group at the federal government, is actually an enforcement agency. And we often think of the Inspector General as doing like fruit and vegetable inspections for the FDA. But really, they are actually a policing organization to go after money flows and fraud that are related to Medicare, Medi-Cal, and other expenditures to focus on that. So somebody put earlier in the chat some of the issues that we're finding with hospice. That's going through the DOJ process right now. So it's not going to go unpunished, but there is a process legally that we have to go through in order for people to actually go to jail. We can't just accuse them of things. What we can do is we can say, here are the facts. This is what we found. We think that this is now a prosecutorial file. We can refer those. And as we're navigating not just the DOJ, but other enforcement agencies inside the federal government, that's one of our friendliest places to operate right now outside of the state of California. Because the state of California, actually, a large portion of its budget is not its own. It's not from us, the taxpayers. It's actually coming through federal government disbursements. And that means that the federal government has a right and responsibility to the American people who funded that money, not just Californians, to manage where it goes. So I've talked a little bit about the power of accountability from the public square, which we are bringing. The rise of independent media is critical in this time because people need to be able to get their information not just from the biased mainstream media. In addition, we have to make sure that these cases are working backwards sometimes from some of these prosecution angles. And then I'll talk about the internal one in just a second. But Seneca, you seem like you had something to say, so I want to give you
I don't have much to add to that, but somebody asked about people don't get caught. It's the sheer amount of fraud. And to your point, you have to build the case. The person is innocent until proven guilty. You have to get someone to charge them, compile the evidence. Maybe we could use AI to help with that, but we need probably 10 times as many people working in these offices to stop that. Also, there could be, on some levels, controlled opposition or people who don't want the full extent of the hammer to fall because it could be more of a bipartisan issue. Now, I would say in looking at local fraud, it's clearly a Democratic Party issue. When I extrapolate it from looking at local fraud, let's take the Chinese Progressive Association and the public sector labor unions. This is a racket they run around the country. There's clear money laundering where they're giving each other money and they're giving it right back to each other. And they're sort of circulating it around. And you're talking about billions of dollars here. Also, the use of fiscal sponsorship to hide political actions from C3s. So that is pretty widespread too. It's so much of it. We've let it go on for so long. It's a big hole to dig ourselves out of. And, I'm not patient either, but I do know that there is some signs of light. I know Harmeet Dillon has definitely charged people. She's been taking aggressive action. She's from California. So I hope that we see more big fraud charges. But if we don't, then we have more questions to ask. How, where's this money going? All of my stuff is local, so I wouldn't take any questions. I would much rather hear Jenny keep talking about CalDoge and this big picture stuff because I don't really get to hear about most of this. And I didn't know that you guys were behind the LA exposing. When I read that article yesterday, I was like, that's exactly what they're doing in Oakland. Exactly what they're doing here.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about the other investigations, but I just want to say, like, so everybody knows the money's gone. I mean, recouping this money, it's not there anymore. It's gone. Our main goal is actually righting the ship for the future, because the more that we stop, the more that we shed a light on what's happening today, the less likely it is that the nefarious activities continue. The more that we punish specific use cases, the less likely it is that people will continue to feel like they can operate outside of the system. But systemic change is a longer term prospect, and we have to actually dig in, and we can't give up on our state in the process of doing that, because systemic change, we have 242 agencies in California. The next largest state, New York, in terms of agency numbers, has 97. Do you know how long it's going to take to unwind the bureaucracy, the fee making, and all of the rules that each one of these agencies have unilaterally come up with that conflict with one another to create the stranglehold on people and businesses and processes in the state? I mean, we can blow it up, but it's going to take some time to dismantle all of that infrastructure that's been built. So our job right now is we're just kind of, it's just light. Turn on the light. The cockroaches are going to run away first. But ultimately, there's still mold in the building. We need a complete renovation. We have a tear down situation in terms of our fundamental infrastructure, and we've got more that we need to do. So how are we at CalDoge doing that? We're just every 2 weeks we release a new file, because we have 800 of them. We can do this for quite some time, and we plan to. Our focus for this specifically is on these cases that are millions of dollars, where this misappropriation of funds is happening, and activities that we specifically want to stop. So our second investigation was one into an organization called Grid Alternatives. Grid actually has a location, Seneca, in Oakland. And this organization has received $1 billion from the state and $300+ million from the Biden administration, Green New Deal, in order to install solar panels on the homes of affordable housing. Okay, so again, most people would say, it's hard to hate that, right? It seems like a kind of reasonable proposition. Here's the problem. We found only $72 million that had actually gone to solar panel installations. What was actually the balance of the money used for was political activism. And that money, by the way, wasn't applied for by a tenant in one of these buildings. It was applied for by the owners of the buildings, who were getting tax credits or green credits that they were able to trade on the international markets, so that they could, defray some of the cost of power. At the same time, our power in the state doubled in terms of cost. So a unit of power went 2x, while the power was being hypothetically defrayed in these small number of places. But what was actually happening is that the organizations were being set up, and they were going to each of the buildings that had these installations, and they were saying, hey, do you like your new power situation? Isn't it great that you got something from the state of California? We would love to make sure that you know who we are. We're your local ambassadors. We're happy to help you ensure that this kind of thing keeps happening. And they built, with the other $900+ million, related organizations that they funneled the money to, in order to make sure that basically just an information war, that people knew that it was Democrats that got it done, and that they needed to keep voting for progressive Democrats in all of the upcoming elections. And so that one, we referred back to the CPUC, which is the one that's in charge of all of the power generation in the state. And I'll tell you, we do some of those for form, because we know exactly what's going to happen to them, which is nothing at all. And that's the point, is that an organization who has oversight into these issues, if a claim is made, there has to be money and staff time allocated to investigations internally, because when money is going out, inevitably you cannot trust that people are going to use it wisely. You have to create oversight for that money. Anybody who's ever had a child and left them alone and told them, no, with no guidance, right? There's ice cream in the freezer, but don't eat it. Make sure you eat all the vegetables. You come home and the ice cream is the first thing gone. Well, the money is the ice cream, and it's all over the place in California. So So that was our second investigation, and we, that was in week 4. We're releasing the next one tomorrow, which is on an organization called Project Home Key. And again, Seneca, they operate also in the Bay Area. A lot of these things are coordinated between very heavily blue or union-dominated areas in the Bay and also Los Angeles County, and then they're kind of dispersed, into other areas in maybe more vigilant counties, but with good, like Orange County has much less fraud because we actually have a pretty significant amount of oversight and governance in the county. LA County is a totally different story. So the one that we're going to talk about tomorrow is homeless housing. And you guys are going to be kind of astonished to figure out what we are discovering there, because I think everybody knows the money's all gone, right? And we have more homeless than we did when we started. And like you said earlier, if this money was being spent properly, we could actually care for the vulnerable in our society. We're clearly not doing that successfully. So where is the money going? Well, about 15% of it is going to this organization. And we'll talk tomorrow about what's happening with that.
Wow. Well, yes. Well, I have a funny story, not necessarily blatant corruption, but to give you a sense of how the NGOs.
Seneca, are you still on mute? I can't hear you, but that doesn't mean anything necessarily. Can everybody
hear me?
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hold on just a second. Let me make sure I'm going to go figure it out.
So, I'm gonna try to remember my train of thought here. Oh crap! I think I forgot it. It's okay. It's so many stories here. It was something that you had just mentioned that jogged my memory about something local. Oh,
was it related to Project Home Key or homelessness?
No, it was the California Endowment. So I my nonprofit, the one that ended up getting attacked by Rob Bonta, we had a call with the endowment. One of my alumni from Cornell worked there. And so she asked me blatantly, she says, what do you guys do for base building? And I never heard of that term before. This was in 2023. And I said, what's that? Base building? What do you mean? She was like, for the Democratic Party. And I was like, we're a nonprofit. And she was just like, and? So there's ways to do it. So it goes to show you, this is a multi-billion-dollar endowment that you can't get money from unless you're willing to do base building for the Democratic Party. Another thing that they do is they create these very advanced ecosystem where, like, if you can share your screen about the California Labor Fed up here, you have all of these, including California, including the Chinese Progressive Association, eBay, all of these different nonprofits, the Rising Group, they have a bunch of Rising names. They basically fund all of these organizations. Some of them may even do good work, right? Some of them may do good work in the community and not even know that the money that they're getting is just so that when it's time to say, hey, I endorse these people, that you will continue to support the people who are giving you the money, which is only natural. And so many people are so removed from politics and don't understand how things work that they think that they basically buy in consent and they're buying these coalitions. One of the ways that you have to fight back is by starting your own ecosystems of organizations that are like-hearted and like-minded. And don't be deterred by the sheer number of progressive entities and how much money they have, because remember one important thing, it's much more expensive to sell a lie than to tell the truth. All right, it costs a lot more money to sell the lie than to tell the truth. So if you're representing the needs of the people and you have 70-30, 80-20 issues that overwhelmingly people want, it's not going to cost as much for you to win on those issues. It will require resources, don't get me wrong. But I'm talking about you can beat the progressives with 10% of their budget if you really are representing what the people actually want and you're able to use and daylight some of this corruption, which is actually the best way to use it. You can get demoralized if you continue to do this research and don't get answers. And it's like, well, why are we doing this if no one's ever going to get caught? And so one of the ways why you're waiting for the slow hand or the long arc of justice to complete itself, one of the things you can do is to use that as a political cudgel to run one candidates or one issue campaign yourself. So don't give up. There is a way to use this to fight back, even if we're not locking people up yet.
That was an excellent segue. So we want to encourage people, if they see fraud, what do we do? Do we call Doge? What do you guys suggest? How can people get involved?
I'd love to actually share my screen because I have a QR code, and you guys can maybe get a little bit centered on some of the stuff that's happening. You can participate, and I'll kind of walk you through a couple of the ways that you can do that. But there were a couple of good questions in the chat that I want to address specifically. So California has a Doge that we have set up outside of the fundamental purview of the government. We are coordinated with White House, but we are not an official agency. I don't take a salary. If you want to work with us, it will be the hardest work and worst pay you've ever had. So just to let you know, that's what you're signing up for. It will also be incredibly rewarding because I think what we're doing, like what the fight that Seneca's in, is that we're making generational change in our state. And people are desperate for the truth. When they hear it, they know it's true, but they just haven't heard it before. And we have to put in some of that legwork to get that done. So if it's all right, if I have permission, I can go ahead and share my screen.
You should be able to.
Okay, great. So let me just make sure I click on this. Are you guys able to see this with the QR code that's there? The California Department of Government Efficiency. So if you scan that QR code, you'll go to the caldoge.ai website, also created with just an amazing team of volunteers. You'll see that the website is very professional. And on the upper right-hand side, there is a click link, which is Fight Fraud. And in there, you can register to volunteer with us. You can host an event, just like this one. It's a great way to begin to get the word out. The only funding that we do need is for some of our researchers and communicators, some of our investigators. It would be great to have some help with that. We can probably do this on a $100,000 budget this year. It's not a lot of money, but those events are really valuable for us to get them the money that they need to kind of keep the infrastructure that supports all of the volunteers running. We also have a call on Tuesdays for if you're interested in getting involved specifically in investigations. If you just want to donate to what we're doing, then you're more than welcome to do that as well. And so we are a 501c3 under the Lincoln Media Foundation. We don't endorse or support specific candidates. That's one of the rules of how a C3 is meant to operate. However, what we do is very, very focused on righting the ship in California. So anyhow, that is a tax deductible donation. On those Tuesday meetings, I am not our investigations lead. I am the director of CalDoge at large. We actually have an investigations group, and we also have a government reform group that's a part of that. But we are, we're pretty tactical. We're super fast. We're using every available technical tool because after all, we're in the greatest state with the greatest technology in the history of the world. And we're going to use it for the benefit of the people. So that's how you can get involved with CalDoge. Awesome. I just also wanted to say one other thing, just in case y'all don't know it. This is separate, of course, from CalDoge, but I actually announced this morning that I'm running for Congress, and I'm not stopping what we're doing at CalDoge. It's just really brought to light for me, like we need more reformers in office and people that are willing to be fundamentally transparent with the American people. I'm running in California's 47th district, which is in Irvine. And if you want to get involved with that, there's just a little bit about my race there. So I'll leave that up while we're taking questions. But I really hope that you will get involved with what we're doing, because I think that I started, getting into politics because I thought something was wrong with the way that they were operating it. And now that I know that it's not just incompetence, but that it's this tactical base building by design in order to keep Republicans into thinner and thinner margins, we just don't have, fair elections or processes in California. We've got to start to fight back.
100%. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Jenny. We do have a question. Scott, if you would like to unmute yourself, we're going to go ahead and, Glenn will unmute you. But we're going to do our question and answer right now. So this is the great thing about our show is we actually take questions from our audience. So Scott, Glenn has unmuted you. So if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Great. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Gosh, thank you all. Seneca, I hear you a lot on John Phillips. And Jenny, I'm also running for Congress in the Burbank, Glendale, Hollywood area against Laura Friedman, who sat, and I'm not asking this question because I want to promote myself at all, but she was the head of the Transportation Committee, in the Assembly, overseeing what I think the budget for the high-speed rail went up 3 times, 4 times during her watch. My question to all of you is, okay, so you have all this evidence, you've done great investigations. Have you ever, I feel like you're going to laugh at this when I ask you this question. Have you presented your evidence to Malia Cohen, the state controller? And if so, what has been her response? Because this is kind of like what she's supposed to be doing. Thank you.
I can talk about this, and then Seneca, if you've got more, you can add. We have not gone through a formal, audit request or a controller request yet, but we are pointing out in every one of our investigations, we're doing her job. This is her job. This is what we are doing is what she is exactly supposed to be doing. And she's gone on the record to say, I really need to hire somebody to do my job because I'm not sure exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And so we do have people in statewide constitutional offices that are truly puppets for this process, and their only job is to let it keep going on. I think that's part of why folks from the outside have to run for office as part of this process. Seneca knows, right? I know, if you're in the middle of the process, then your only job is going to be to perpetuate what has been done before. Reformers have to come from the outside. So, I applaud you for running, Scott. I think it's really important that right now, collectively, we're pointing out exactly what you're saying, which is like, we do have a state controller. It is her job. She's not doing it. There is fraud in California. What's actually happening? And that exact accountability could at least lead to her doing her job. I mean, one of my hot takes is that I think Newsom is going to become the king of fraud prosecution this year. I think it's the only way that he actually saves his butt for a presidential run, because we're hanging it all on his neck. The nation is hanging this on his neck right now. And I think he's going to have to make some heads roll inside his own organizations. That's one way to get accountability. Another is to elect different people. I think we do have some chances to do that as well. So those are a couple of things that we're doing specifically.
Thank you, Jenny.
Great question. Tracy, go ahead and ask your question, please.
Hi, I'm so excited about what you guys are doing and the opportunity to connect in this way. And there's so much more to be done. The CARES and ESSERS money that disappeared right during the pandemic scam, and so much more. We've got a lawsuit that's heading to the Supreme Court in 26 as teachers and staff who were lost jobs as a result of this. And we're still fighting, and would love to, I like, just on my way home from work, on my way to this Zoom, I heard about, oh, wow, there are people who've documented even more fraud. That how do we connect with you so that we can support the team and get these things researched and then get the word out?
I think that's a really great point. I mean, one of the reasons that I'm really loving doing this is that I think a lot of people historically have been like, my fraud investigations. I actually don't care if they're ours or anybody else's. I do think that that's our fundamental job, is to raise the profile of a lot of these and make sure that they go to the right places. So you can join as a volunteer our investigations team. You can work on your own investigations as a part of that, which we will support you on. We have on our advisory board, we have former FBI investigators, we have personal and private investigators that are licensed. They have systems and recommendations for where we can kind of find and build these cases. And like I mentioned earlier, we have coordination with some of the prosecuting offices as well. So some of you are going to find that the way that we do it, if you want to go outside of it, as long as fraudsters are caught in California, I don't really care. I get excited about it, and I applaud everybody who's doing this work. But there is a lot that I think we can add to the process to help to ensure that those outcomes are what we're really hoping for, which is not just retribution or restitution, but actually fundamental change.
And also, many of us have, friends and family across Southern California. Irvine, Burbank
Yeah.
were mentioned. I'm in the West San Fernando Valley. We're all stepping up every way we can in every office election that we can. But maybe we can have a little huddle, this group, right? Fraud in
Yeah.
California Town Hall.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of power in doing things together. I think Democrats have organized that with our money for so long that it's time for us to do it. And like Seneca mentioned earlier, we can do it through relationship. We can do it through right. So if you have people that are in Irvine in my district, or if there are people that I know in San Bernardino, we're going to work to continue to just make those connections. And we're going to, for me, I feel like this is a life calling. I actually owned a house outside of the state, not because I wanted to move there, but because it was closer to my family. We used to spend some time there, and we felt last year we should sell it and put all of our money into California. Like, we should have no ties somewhere else, because this feels like the kind of commitment that is going to take, it's going to take a minute for us to actually really build this state back to not just where it was, but actually to what it can be in the future. So, that's my warning, is not only will I pay you very little, but you're signing up for a long haul, because this is going to take time for us to get stuck in, and to prevail and to continue to kind of beat this drum. But it's gonna happen. Good does win in the end of every great epic story.
Amen. Thank you.
So you feel there's hope?
I feel there's massive amounts of hope.
Good.
I think for me, the only hope is when we have done absolutely everything and nothing has changed. That's the only opportunity for us to be hopeless. And that's why fundamentally, when I ran for governor, I was like, wait, there's no organization in this state. Like, there's no base building in the Republican Party. There's nobody who's actually doing any kind of ballot harvesting or communications at any kind of central level. It rose my hope instead of depleting it, because I thought, wow, if we're getting 45% of the vote doing fundamentally nothing, just imagine if we did something, what we could do to make change. And so I'm really excited by these kinds of opportunities. It's tragic. It's wrong. It shouldn't have happened. But finding fraud in California helps us explain that we're not crazy living in a state that is on such a rapid decline. It's by design. And that to me is like, well, if the decline is by design, then ascent is possible as well.
And that's why we do TownHall Central. That's why Dawn started it, to educate people, to get involved, and we can make a difference. And just like you said, conservatives had 45% of the vote last election. What can we do for this one? So that's why we do this show. Ron, you have your hand up. Do you want to ask your question and unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Denise. So I guess I have a two-part question, and first part of it aimed at Jenny when she was talking about base building. A friend of TownHall Central, Kevin Kiley, this week dropped out of the GOP party, which to me says a lot. But I'll let you comment on that. The second part question had to do with what Scott, kind of introduced. Scott Myers was introducing when he mentioned the bullet train. Now, the bullet train is is on the radar of Trump and Doge at the federal level, and they were talking about clawing back. If you're talking about evidence, the biggest sore thumb, billions and billions of dollars. So what is Cal Doge? Why isn't that, if you're talking about low-hanging fruit, you had the LA Times criticizing it on multiple occasions over multiple years. So anyway, could you speak to that? Anyway, thank you, and I'll shut up and let you talk.
No worries. I can speak to, I'll speak to the bullet train. One of the things that we can fundamentally do is just cut off funding. If funding stops going to an organization, they have to reform, or they go away. Doesn't mean that they don't kind of get up to their old tricks in a new way. The state of California has vowed to spend our personal money, which who knows where they're fabricating that from, what kind of lies they're telling us about unfunded pension liabilities and other things in order to find that money. I do think it's important for us realistically just to understand that clawing money back that's already been spent is really going to be challenging. I said that earlier. I want to reinforce that. I don't want to give people the false hope that we're going to get a big refund as we're doing these fraud investigations. I do think that in the future, our taxes could go down. I think the cost of living could decrease significantly. I think that that our fundamental way of life could become deflationary in California. But I don't actually think that it's reasonable to assume that we're going to get a $200,000 paycheck per person in order to apologize for the fraud that's happened. But what is happening at the federal government is the cease of funding that was going to the bullet train. And so that kind of action is actually one method of enforcement, and it's a really dang good one. So if you have a hospice provider, that's kind of one of the things that's happening now. HHS can say, hey, you're under investigation. We're gonna freeze your funding for 90 days. All of a sudden, people start to send in documentation that wasn't being sent in. They stop going to lunch for 8 hours a day when they're supposed to be working and in their offices. They stop actually claiming for money in the first place because they know that the gig is up. And so there are pieces of that are super important. I'm not super worried about. My job is not the reputation of the GOP. I like Seneca. I was a socialist in college. I moved to the middle, living in California because I was a big scaredy cat and I didn't want anybody to know that I was anything other than a Democrat and what I felt like was a 90-10 Democrat state. It's not at all, but it felt like that from the messaging standpoint. And I'm pretty proudly a conservative, and I feel like the Republican Party has done a good job of communicating that our values are fiscal responsibility and security in cities and funded police and other things that matter. So Kevin's decision is his own. I think there are probably political benefits and also ramifications for his decision. But as for me, it's not a difficult decision to be a part of the GOP because my ultimate call in my life is to be a reformer. So if there's something wrong with the GOP, I guess we'll have to fix it. But ultimately, I want to fix our state. That's what I feel like my mandate is. That's why I want to go to Congress, is to have the voice in Congress to speak out about what should be happening in California rightfully.
Awesome. Cynthia, you have a question.
Yeah, this one I'm going to toss over to Seneca, but Seneca, I've been chatting with you, and he already knows how I am about this. What are we going to do about the unions?
Well, I've got one solution. So I spent a better part of my union career before I went into management and was in charge of actually leading negotiations, which is sort of like the highest level stuff you can do for a union. I was an organizer, and in every organizing campaign, there was my union, another union, and no union. The reason for that is because SEIU and the nurses were raiding association. So let me give you some quick background. An association is a one-on-one union that's only at that workplace, and they're not members of an international or a larger union. And so I think that the answer is, first, let me be very clear. I think public sector unionism needs to be revisited, considering that the majority of union members in America, and there's no boss like in private sector. In the free market, there's a boss, and so labor is part of the free market. That doesn't apply to public sector. So I think there needs to be restrictions, and we should not allow unions to be past associations, which are one-on-one or at most like inside of a county, inside of one employer. I think that'll solve a lot of issues that we currently have right now. It also will keep the collective bargaining rights for those workers. You're not going to be able to tell workers that after not being at will in a perilous economy, go to being at will and not having your job protected because unions are bad. What you can do is tell them your union, and I know we're decertifying SEIU in Oakland right now. We've dropped 1 out of 4 members already. You have this, it's actually starting to happen in certain places around the country. Members can say, I want my own union. I want to be an association. The city of Fremont, California left SEIU in 2014 to form a City of Fremont Employees Association. They still have a union. They still have a contract. They still get all the raises and stuff. But what they don't do is spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get people elected to form a sort of a perfect circle where union and management have very little distinction between them. There's very little daylight between the actual elected officials and management and unions. The city of Oakland was so flagrant about this that after former Mayor Chantal was elected mayor, her first hire was the policy director from SEIU, who became her policy director. And the moment she was recalled, he went right back to the union. So you can't do anything about them except inspire those members to leave their unions. I'm talking about under existing laws. You can inspire members to leave their union. Their dues will decrease because they're not kicking up to other places. And what you'll find is that the rank and file in most unions do not appreciate the union spending more time on social justice than direct representation. So I think that if you were actually to have some well-funded campaigns, which I've been pushing National Right to Work and others to embrace more of an asymmetrical approach and stop the blatant union busting, it doesn't work, which, I mean, it works in some places, but it doesn't work. It's not going to work in California. Let me speak for California. It's not going to work in California. And workers are not going to go to be at will when they have job protection. So we need to decertify them and replace them with associations. Another thing, when it comes to corruption, and Jenny, I need some help with this. Unions are not allowed to use their dues money on politics. I don't know if most of you guys know that. Unions have to fill out what's called an LM2 report. And that LM2 report breaks down unions' time and expenditures into 3 categories: direct representation, external organizing, and political. The reason for that is prior to the Janus right to work decision, workers did not have to pay for the external organizing. They only had to pay for direct representation. So there was a formula, usually around 85% of union dues. You could pay your fair share, is what it was called. So you didn't have to be a member of the union, but you had to pay a fair share. Now you don't have to pay anything after the Janus decision in 2021, which we thought would have led to an exodus of union members. However, again, nobody wants to pick not having job protection and pension versus they don't care about the larger politics as much as you think. However, here's the part I would like some help with. If you look at the COPE is SEIU's PAC, right? Committee of Political, whatever. If you look at the union's PACs and you do an audit, because they've never been audited, there've never been any forensic audits on unions' political action committees, and you pressure check the claim that this money is coming from their members, it is not going to add up. I can tell you from being a union staffer, it's like pulling teeth to get members to play into politics. This is one of the reasons why in 2012, I forgot the proposition, this is the first big time you saw the unions flex political muscle is when they beat a ballot measure to stop them that was going to prevent them from taking political contributions from payroll deduction. So these voluntary contributions into the union political action committees come directly from payroll, right? And there was an effort to stop that, and unions beat it back pretty handily. And that's when anyway, I don't want to get too off the deep end there, but we need to check the PACs, to see if they're lying about where they get their money from. My guess is they're getting money from a lot of other places they're not reporting. Right, and they're acting like it's coming from their members, but I don't believe it is. So, just throwing that out there for Cal Doge. But yes, encourage, if you are a member of a union or you are a member of a bargaining unit and you've already opted out your union, and you know that there's widespread dissatisfaction, you don't have to get rid of them. You can replace them with an association. Call me. I'm an expert at that, and we'll come and help you guys out. I wish we could get. This goes back to something Jenny was saying earlier about base building and organizing. My biggest, and I'm an independent, just so everyone knows, I'm post-partisan. I don't do left-right. I go up-down, either you have integrity or you don't. And I tend to more recently vote for more conservative candidates because they've shown more integrity. It's just as simple as that. But I will say that there's no money spent on organizing. They waste money. My biggest issue in Tennessee and in California with Republicans is that they waste money on BS and they're not spending money where it matters the most, which is supporting local organizing efforts, supporting local truth tellers who do independent media. There are many of them like myself. And I can get zero. And this is not me complaining. Sorry, I am complaining. Let me just own it. I'm complaining right now. I should not, with all of the stories we broke, not be able to cobble together a decent budget to totally scorch earth these phony progressives after showing proof of concept that we could recall two of them with no money whatsoever. We should be able to scale that up immediately. And we haven't been able to get any interest in it whatsoever. I just keep watching think tank after think tank, so tens of millions of dollars at stuff that doesn't move a needle when they need to invest in local organizing. If all politics are local, the way to reclaim our politics is school boards and city council. There needs to be a focus on school boards, city councils, the lowest elected level of office, and then you work your way back up the legislative or executive ladder, depending on what positions you're running. And I do think that we can reclaim power in American cities for people who want to do the right thing, who are honest. So I believe in that. I'm optimistic, as Jenny is. I think that we are making traction. If you remember this old movie, What About Bob? From back in the day, I used to love that movie. Baby steps. We're making baby steps, but we are making progress.
That was awesome. I also read too in the book called, it's about the book, I'm forgetting the name. Colorado went blue in 4 years. And they said, if you want to run for office, start with your HOA board. If you can handle being on the HOA board, you can handle elected office. Blueprint. The Blueprint. That's an excellent book. It talks about how Colorado went blue in 4 years. We can reverse this in California. Scott, I'm going to take you as the last question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, hopefully you can get somebody else. It's only about a 10-second observation. The bullet train estimated completion cost is $128 billion. If you do the math, that's 640 million plane tickets from LAX to San Francisco. That's it.
Scott, math is not legal in California. How did you get away with doing math? I was going to talk about this with Seneca earlier, but I think one of the reasons that I love running for office is that it's always incredibly educational. And somebody pulled me aside at a meeting where there were a number of Dems that were there. It was at USC, and they said, "Do you want to know how you would build the bullet train?" And I said, I would love to know. I mean, I actually am generally pro-train. I'm just not pro-wasted money to appropriate farmland for trains that nobody's going to take. And they said, you just use the median for I-5. Like, it's already CEQA approved, that we already own the land for the federal and the state government. It already owns it. They were like, if you want to actually figure out what happened with the money, figure out why we're not building the train in the most engineering feasible and cost feasible way. And I think that's just where a lot of these investigations start. Seneca, for you, what I would say is that CalDOJ, like, we could look into some of the documents. We can definitely try use AI and human understanding to, if you can kind of say, hey, these are some of the filings that these organizations have. I suspect something is going on here. We can definitely do some of that, but a lot of it is really basic math. It's like, how many members do you have, and how much are their dues, and how much should you make, and how much are you making? And then when that delta doesn't come out to zero, and there's something being stuffed in or hidden there, then that's kind of a lot of the place where we start. And so a lot of this is starts with a hypothesis. It's a scientific method for fraud. And then we kind of say, hey, we think that might be here. And then we go after it in specific ways. So just wanted to make sure both if you want to work with us on that, gosh, I think it would be incredible. I do think, I am not explicitly anti-union, but I do think that our state would be very different if we didn't have publicly funded unions. It's kind of the publicly funded unions they operate very similar to the way that we were talking about the eviction lawyers earlier, right? They operate in contradiction to the taxpayers that are funding them in order to serve them. They're rising the costs of the things that we're trying to do. They're doing that through collective bargaining. Again, totally legal, but when it's private, it's different. When it's public and you have this kind of captive captive group and captive audience, then it feels like you're fundamentally negotiating against yourself in every single deal. So, you know, anyhow, hopefully that helps you guys just kind of get a sense of where I think some of the most important opportunity is. And also, I think finding fraud is something that we don't necessarily need, you know, CPAs. My sister is actually a CPA white collar fraud investigator. She thinks that what I'm doing is kind of hilarious right now because she's done it seriously with like she's like Bernie Madoff was one of their targets, right? And so they've done some really big, really impressive, like, you know, federal and international fraud Ponzi schemes. What we're doing in California, these people are not that smart. They just have operated with immunity for a long time, and so she thinks it's adorable. Like, it's so cute, you know, what we're able to find here because like what they've been doing is the hard work. What we're doing now is literally just turning on the light. That's where it starts.
Excellent show. Excellent. I hope everyone, once we get this up on our Facebook page and our Rumble page, share it. We will also send it out as in our email. But this is great information. And again, this is why Dawn started this show, is to let you know what's going on in our state. And if this topic interests you, get involved. This is how we will make a difference in our state. I'm a second generation. My husband's first generation. He's actually a descendant of Priscilla and John Alden. This has got to drive our founding fathers rolling in their graves to see how we don't appreciate what we have, our God-given rights, and it's ridiculous. So we can do it. We can make a difference. So thank you both, Seneca and Jenny. Awesome information. And if you guys didn't know, I know they know, Newsom wants to spend $19 million on his marketing campaign. So maybe we should say something. That doesn't sound right. Does this involve an insurance company and at the French Laundry again? This has got to stop. It has to stop.
Seneca said it earlier, right? That the truth is cheaper to message than a lie. Yes. I think he's trying to spend $19 million to message a lie when everybody actually gets the truth. Like, the numbers don't lie. If people are leaving California, they're, you know, when somebody runs away from a fire, it's probably because there's a fire. If somebody runs away from what's happening in the state, it's probably because they don't want to be here anymore and there's somewhere else that's better. And like, I think that the faster he acknowledges that, the longer his political career will be. Everything that he's doing right now is just ending his own career. So we'll see if my hot take and other hot takes are true this year, if he kind of gets on board with some of that. But like $19 million to market a lie is honestly sounds pretty cheap, because I think people they're bought into the truth. They already know it. And we have refugees from our state that are proclaiming it in Nashville and Texas and Florida and Kansas and Idaho. And I mean, literally almost every state in the nation has California refugees right now.
Yeah. And it's sad. It's either we stay and fight or we run off, and the state's just going to go worse. So, and we don't want that. I mean, this is why, you know, my family moved out here. My husband's family, we all didn't just come here. We moved here somewhere in our relationships. So we can make a difference. So again, Seneca, Jenny, great show. Thank you so much. And I hope we can have you both on soon again to give us an update. So I hope you guys like the new format. It's a little bit shorter. Hopefully that works better with everyone's schedule. But again, I want to remind you that our next show will be on Thursday, April 30th. We have our good friend Susan Shelley. She will be going over the June ballot because, you know, they never write it in plain English. So we need to know what it's actually saying. TownHall Central is brought to you by the support of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association and Greg Britton, attorney at law. And so that's it. I hope you guys have a great weekend. And thank you so much. And we'll see you on April 30th. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.